Okay everybody, welcome back. So now we're going to start you through the process of preparing for your weld. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set up for everything that we need to do right up until the moment when we pull the trigger on that torch and we activate the arc between the contact tip or that center conductor and the piece of metal or pieces of metal that you're hoping to bond together. Okay, that's going to be our plan. That's what I'm going to show you here. And I also want to walk you through a few protocols as we do that I think are particularly important to keeping everybody safe. Now again, one more time, I'm all dressed up and ready to go. I have my fireproof welding jacket, cotton welding jacket on, my cotton pants. You can see I have my helmet in place, my auto shade helmet. I have my leather boots, and I'm really ready to go, okay? All I need to do is put on my gloves and pull down my shade helmet. I'm ready to weld. You already know about the settings on the shade helmet. We should be good to go. The other things I want to show you is that I already have the ground hooked up to my table, okay? Basically what we're doing is we're building a circuit that travels through from that sort of like contact tip over to the piece of metal that I'm trying to weld, and then back through the machine until it comes back to the ground again. So in essence, we're making kind of an electrical circle. And when we pull that trigger, we're closing closing the circuit, or actually we're sort of shorting it, frankly. And what that's going to do is it's going to create an arc. As soon as that sort of like contact tip, that center conductor comes in contact with the metal we want to weld, an arc is going to form, a powerful electrical arc that's so powerful it melts the little piece of metal that's traveling out of the tip of that torch, and that torch just keeps feeding that metal out, even though it keeps sort of like pushing electricity through it, making contact and welding. And basically you get, if it was really slow motion, it would be like cuck, 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 cuck. But at full speed, it's like grrrr. So you're getting this kind of like repeated pattern of electrical arc, meltage, advancement. Electrical arc, advancement of the wire, meltage. And it just repeats and repeats and repeats and repeats really fast. And you're trying to get a really good, consistent, clean version of that, okay? So that's what's happening. It happens so fast it feels kind of fluid, all right? So that's what we're shooting for. For demonstration purposes only, just so I don't create an arc at the table, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and take my ground clamp off. Okay, that should be attached when you're working, but I don't want to accidentally produce an arc here. We're going to save that for demonstration. All right. I'm going to stand up and I'm going to quickly show you what I'm going to do to prepare for my weld here at the acorn table. The acorn table is filled with these square holes. We've already covered the fact that there's a whole bunch of clamps and stuff that you can use to secure your work at the table and make sure it's in good solid contact with the metal at the table. So let me start there. First things first, let's just say, and I'm going to do it right here, let's just say I want to weld this piece of steel right here to this piece of steel at roughly a right angle. Okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to set them, for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to set them up over one of these holes. I like to do this, especially when we're beginning, just because I feel like when you're not practiced, you can easily weld that to the table. So what we want to do is create a little spot here for any additional weld to fall through to the floor. Now the next thing we have to do, now that we have them making contact at this point right here, okay, we have them making contact at that point right there, we have to find a way to clamp them to this surface. Now we tend to keep some angle iron on the table, and this is a great tool for this job. All you have to do is set it up like that, make sure these two pieces are still in contact. I'm going to take the helmet off for a moment. And then take one of your clamps, like this one. Let's see, maybe we'll use the big one because it's got a bigger arm and better reach. Okay, like that one, perfect. We gently drop it to our angle iron until we're making contact, and then we clamp it down and we just make micro adjustments as we need them, like that. Nope, you got to be careful until we're starting to make enough contact. There we go, like so, until both of these are held in place and they won't move. So you can see I've used this piece of angle iron with pressure from this bar clamp, which is fitted in with this into this socket with this post, to make sure that this is all stable and making really good contact with our table. That's our goal. That's our objective. That's it right there. We just kind of, in a nutshell, set ourselves up to make the first weld. Now the next thing we want to do, I've already mentioned this, but we want to get this air intake, this duct, over here close to the work. So as I'm welding, and I'm going to put this torch relatively close to the surface right now, and I need to put my gloves on when I'm really welding. But anyway, as I'm getting close over here, you can see where my welding vicinity would be. As I'm sort of welding and making smoke, it's getting drawn right into there. That's our goal, okay? That's what we're shooting for. So right now, I have my work set up. I have it over a hole, so I'm not going to weld it to the table. I have it clamped in place. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set my, I've already, let's just assume that my welder is already set up to all the proper settings. I'm already grounded, the table's ready to go, okay? Everything is ready to roll. I'm going to get my welding helmet back on, okay? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put my gloves on because I'm going to need those to keep my arms safe. You've got a couple options here when you do this. These are actually designed for going over your jacket, but there are gloves that you can go inside of your jacket. There's a button there that allows you to accommodate a thinner glove so that you're actually even less likely to get a hot spark up inside your gloves, okay? So I'm gloved up, I've got my helmet on. Next thing I would do is I would get my torch and I would get ready to do my weld. Now, first things first, okay? I'm gonna pull the trigger, and as you saw before, that's not a very good, let's try this. As you saw before, okay, that's pretty shiny too. You get that center conductor coming out when you pull the trigger, okay? What you want to do before every weld, and I'll kind of get up close for this, is you want to cut that contact tip so that it's just exactly, and let's see if we can see that well, so that it's exactly 1/4 of an inch, boy that's really the wrong color, 1/4 of an inch beyond the copper nozzle. Just 1/4 of an inch beyond the copper nozzle, okay? And you can see that's about where we're at right there. If it's really long like this and it's making contact, you're gonna burn out that center conductor really fast, and it's gonna take quite a while for that wire to advance again and start the arc over, okay? But if it's right here, you can just keep that arc moving, no problem. If it's too close here, what happens is you're creating just too little tight of a pool of suppressant gas. This is exactly the sort of like right distance for your welding, all right? Now let me show you how we're gonna set up for a weld. And what we're gonna be doing primarily is what we call spot welds. Now I would probably at this point pull my mask down, but you can't see me so you don't know that I'm doing that or not. But I would pull my mask down and I would set myself up to make my first weld, okay? Now, what that's gonna entail, and hopefully you can see this from where you are, let me just quickly zoom in a little bit on the area where we're working, right there, okay? What that entails is putting that center conductor in contact with your work without touching it to the nozzle, okay? You wanna just float above. Now the best way I know of to do that is to take my fingers and pinch. I'm using my left hand and I'm right-handed, so I'm using my left hand. I'm pinching the nozzle here. I'm putting my hand against the table, and then I'm just tipping the whole thing up until the nozzle itself is vertical, okay? Now what I want to do is I want to do that right over my work, like that, and hopefully you can see in there. I want to come down until I feel that nozzle making contact with the metal that I plan to weld, okay? So I'm coming down, I'm making contact. Once I'm in contact, I am at exactly the right moment to go ahead and start my weld. I make sure that my helmet's on, and in just a moment, I'm gonna pull the trigger. This is where we're gonna stop for the moment. When we pull the trigger, the weld is gonna begin. This is what I'm gonna teach you more about in person. This is what I wanna show you and have you feel in your 30, 40-minute session with me on in the next class, okay? So we're gonna stop right there, and I wanna walk you through a few protocols. So that was us just getting ready to actually weld the two pieces together. We'll continue this in person. Before we do that, let me tell you about one more thing that has to happen. I'm gonna just pull the camera back a little bit so you can see me, and I'm gonna turn it just a touch, like that, and I'm gonna enter the frame again. Here I am. I wanna talk to you about the helmet and keeping other people safe in this environment, okay? So let me get my helmet up on my head, and let me actually bring my nozzle back over. Now, when you're setting up to weld, you've got everything all ready to go. It's all set up at the table here, ready for action. What I'm gonna ask you to do is, before you actually make contact with that metal, you're gonna go through a series of helmet protocols to make sure everybody's eyes are protected. Because this can blind you, okay? The bright light that comes off the arc you produce with the MIG welder is enough to sear little sort of like holes in your, I guess it kind of destroys cones and rods and leaves you in small ways partially blind. And over time that can add up to a more profound type of blindness. So you don't want to subject anybody to that. So what I have is a system that I haven't seen anywhere else, but I like to do it here, at least for basic students, just to make sure you're all safe. It's based on climbing and how they sort of like keep you safe with ropes before you sort of like climb up a cliff. And in climbing, you start by sort of tying yourself to the rope, and then the person who's kind of like watching you is holding the other end of the rope. You guys have a back and forth, you have a dialogue. So the person who ties in asks, belay on? And the person who's sort of holding the rope says, yeah, belay is on. Or on belay is actually what the climber would say. And then the person who's holding the rope would say, yeah, belay is on. And that's great. And then everybody's helmets go down. So what we will do is we're going to say, helmets on. And everybody would put their helmet down and then say, helmet on. Okay? Now, this is the point at which it's actually safe to think about welding. So you get yourself set up, you're ready to weld, and the moment you're ready to pull that trigger, you say, welding. And before you weld, before you pull that trigger, everybody else around you, everybody else who's sort of like near you and observing, you have to hear them say, weld on. When you hear them say weld on, you can pull that trigger and weld. Now, once you're finished welding and you've pulled the welder away, you say, helmets off. And then everybody can pull their helmets off and say helmet off. That'll make sure that nobody is subject to that super bright light. Okay? So what we've done here, just in review, we've set up everything that we need to weld. We've made sure we have good sort of like air flow, draw. We've set up the ground. We've got the welder, the torch ready. The welder's all set. We have that 1/4 inch just above the nozzle ready to go. We understand that we're going to make contact with the center conductor, but not, or the contact tip, but not the nozzle edge. Okay? And we're ready to sort of like weld, and then we go through our helmet protocols. You can say helmets or masks. Masks on or helmet on. Everybody says masks on or helmets on. And then when you're ready to weld, you say welding, and everybody around you says weld on, okay? I hope that didn't get confusing. I said that a little bit different each time. Let me just clarify it one last time. Masks, everybody says masks on. Welding, You put your welding, you've got your welding mask down, everybody else does too. You say welding, everybody says weld on. You know it's safe. You start your welding, when you're done, you say masks off. Let's do it that way, masks off. All right, I think that should clarify it. By this point in time, you should have some sort of understanding of the acorn table. You should understand how to set up the welder, and you should be able to understand how to set up your work for welding, or at least the beginnings of that. We'll cover the rest in class, but these 3 videos that we've just shot should get you through the process of getting yourself set up and ready to roll without too much trouble, and that'll save us some time when we come to the actual process of welding itself. All right, I look forward to seeing you in the studio.